Hello, and welcome to another vlog. I'd first like to wish everyone a happy Halloween. Now that we've got that out of the way, this week's theme is medication. As usual, I will be releasing a video on Thursday in which I talk in general terms about what medication is, what some types of medication are, and why medication is important. But today there's a few things that I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about some of the medications that I take. I also want to talk about two very expensive medications in particular. And because it's Halloween, I want to talk about some accessible Halloween costumes. So let's jump right into it. So I myself take 4 different drugs. And I'm going to explain what each of those medications are, how long I've been taking them, and what I take them for. So the first medication that I take is called deflazacort. It's a corticosteroid that I've been taking ever since I was 9. And the medication's purpose is essentially to slow down the progression of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So I take that every Saturday and Sunday. I have to take 10 pills on Saturday and then 10 on Sunday. And I've done this every day since I was 9. Now, most people who are on the deflazacort take, I think, about 3 pills a day, but I was put in one of the study groups that does 10 on the weekends. So that is the main drug that I take for the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And that steroid has a few side effects. Most notably, it causes weight gain and it weakens my bones. So I manage those symptoms or those side effects in a number of ways. I'm constantly monitoring my nutrition. I count my calories every day. And I'm also taking Tums and vitamin D as a calcium supplement to slow down the weakening of my bones. I also get an infusion annually to prevent osteoporosis. So that's for the deflazacort. One of the other medications that I'm on is called lisinopril. I've been on this drug since I was about 13 when I started to get heart weakness. So this is an ACE inhibitor. A few years after that, I started taking something called carvedilol, which is a beta blocker. And then a few years after that, I started taking something called spironolactone, which is a diuretic. Now, I don't know what each of those medications does on their own, but together they help to keep my heart functioning. And other than some low blood pressure, there's really no major side effects from those drugs. And all of those medications that I take, I'm taking because of the Duchenne muscular dystrophy, for one reason or another. Jumping back to the deflazacort, I'm very fortunate to live in Canada because the people in the United States only recently got legal access to deflazacort. It's been available in Canada for many years as an experimental drug, but it's only recently become legally available in the United States, and I know it's very expensive. And this kind of segues into the next thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about 2 drugs in particular. One's called Etiplirsen and one's called Spinraza. Both drugs have a couple of things in common. First of all, they're both intended to treat rare health conditions. Etiplirsen is meant to treat some people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, whereas Spinraza is intended to treat people with spinal muscular atrophy. Both of those conditions are considered rare disorders. The other thing that they have in common is that they're very expensive. Etiplirsen costs, on average, $300,000 per year, and that price is based on dose, which is determined by the patient's weight. So the heavier the patient, the more expensive the price of that drug. Spinraza, on the other hand, costs $750,000 for the first year, and then $375,000 every year after that. It's $125,000 per dose. You get 6 doses the first year, and then every year after that you get 3 doses. As far as I understand, both of these drugs are medications that the patients are going to be taking for their entire lives. So they're going to be paying that much money every year. And in most cases, or in a lot of cases, the insurance companies aren't covering these drugs because they're new and they're experimental and for a number of other reasons. So many of these patients have to find other ways to finance these life-saving drugs. Now, there's a number of excuses that the companies come up with to defend the price of these medications. Sometimes they'll say it's because they need the money to research more drugs, future medications, kind of like Etiplirsen and Spinraza. In other cases, they'll just say it's because it's such a small market that they need to reimburse the costs somehow. Now, I don't know if either of those excuses really validates the price of these medications. Personally, I don't think they do. But here's what I do know. A medication is useless if no one can access it. And that's really what's happening with these drugs, is very few people can access them, so they're not really helping anyone, with the exception of the few people who are fortunate enough to access the drugs. Now, most of the people watching this video are probably never going to use Etiplirsen or Spinraza, so you may be wondering, well, why should I care? Well, if companies like Sarepta, that's the manufacturer of Etiplirsen, are willing to make drugs like these this expensive, then who's to say they're not willing to make other drugs just as expensive? Perhaps a drug that you yourself will someday rely on. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it could. No one's immune to sickness. And experimental drugs often cost a lot of money. These are not the only drugs that are this expensive, and I'm sure you'll hear of others. We hear of this occasionally about these life-saving drugs that are way overpriced. So it's not something that's limited to just these two drugs. So what can you do about it? Well, talk to your doctors, talk to your government officials, talk to anyone who will listen, and tell them that you're not okay with this, that there needs to be an alternative. Healthcare isn't a privilege, it's a right. And maybe it won't do anything, but at least your voice will be heard. And who knows, if there's enough outcry, maybe things will change. But if you don't try, there's no chance at making things better. So that's a little bit about that. On a lighter note, I'm going to talk about some accessible Halloween costumes. So I've been looking at some articles online of accessible Halloween costumes for people with disabilities. And I'll include a link to one of the articles that I was looking at on ranker.com. And just to give you some ideas of what some of the costumes were, there are people who dressed up as people from superheroes like Superman and Batman, video game characters like Super Mario, some of them dressed up as movie characters like Wall-E, different types of animals, robots, tanks, Vikings, so many different costumes. And each of these costume wearers has found a way to incorporate their disability into the costume. Perhaps it's turning their wheelchair into a ship or a TIE fighter. Maybe it's people who are amputees making it look like they've been in a shark attack, or just creative ways of coming up with a costume that is inclusive, even though you have a disability, right? So it just shows the level of creativity and problem solving that people with disabilities will go to fit in and to participate in society. So I'll include a link to that article, as well as an article about the two medications that I talked about, Etiplirsen and Spinraza. I encourage you to check them both out. There's some very valuable and interesting information in all of those articles. And if you enjoy those articles, I hope you'll tune in Thursday for Thursday's video. Thanks for watching, and see you on Thursday.